Good morning and welcome to Supermania. I am your host, Catherine McCord. We are here to discuss all things neurodiverse and mental health related. That is what this show is dedicated to. I am very excited about our topic today. We're going to be discussing, so I've been diagnosed, now what? Because there are things that come after diagnosis. We're going to dive into kind of the personal aspects and also the business aspects as well, and how you may need to handle this with your employer. And for that, I have a very special guest. I'm very excited to bring her on. Let's welcome Miss Jessica Williams. Yay! Good morning and welcome to Supermania.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk about this. This is going to be a very, it's near and dear to my heart. So I think this will be an interesting conversation.
Good. And so I like to start off. So I have multiple neurodiversities, actually, one of which is an undiagnosable seizure disorder. Super fun there. But it does affect my neural pathways and how my mind processes information. And also I have bipolar 1. So those are my two neurodiversities. If you don't mind sharing, what are your neurodiversities?
Yeah, so my neurodiversity, as a kid, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and it's something that has impacted my life ever since. I always laugh and say I'm super dyslexic.
I love that.
I'm super dyslexic. And then also just, I'd say depression and anxiety have been throughout my life, waves and flows, but just super dyslexic.
I like that. Super dyslexic. I'm going to start saying I'm super bipolar. I like that. It goes with the show, right? It just kind of goes with the show.
Like superhero, super dyslexic.
It is. Yeah. I was like, yeah. And I'm a huge superhero and like comic book nerd. Always have been. So I want to talk about it. It's interesting. So I work in talent acquisition, people consulting, and HR tech. You're a VP of people. Mm-hmm. So we both have pretty high level jobs, right? So I want to point that out. So people get confused and they're like, oh, if you have this, then you won't be as successful.
Yeah. Which is ironic because at Refine Labs, which is where I work, we have a ERG called Refined Minds. And one of the first things that we did was talk about like everyone identify like you and I just did. And then people with kids wanted to identify with like what they were working through with that. And so we had an employee whose son had just been diagnosed with dyslexia. And so that's when he and I jumped on a call and talked about it. Cause I was like, listen, I want to tell you what I went through and like how my parents, literally, it was never anything that was shameful or like we talked about it very freely. It was like, oh, you need support and this is how we're going to get you support. So I had my parents and my teachers kind of set me up to win. And so it was never this is going to hinder you. And so that was my recommendation for him as a parent that had just had a child diagnosed with what I have. So I do think it's interesting when I disclose to people, they're like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I made it this far.
Yeah, right. Like, look at me. I can still human. Who knew? I can still do things and be successful in business. And actually, there's almost every entrepreneur that you can name has a neurodiversity of some sort. And dyslexia is extremely common in highly successful people, including the ever famous and huge advocate, Richard Branson, a Virgin. They are absolutely wonderful. Oh, and our favorite Tara Furiani is on, and she's talking about all the beauties of her neurodiversity and just neurodiversity in general. And, I like to say, so I was, so mine is also one of my earlier diagnosis, the bipolar 1. That comes with a lot of misconceptions too on the mental health front. So people are like, in fact, I've had people overtly say to me, of all people, I would never hire somebody that's bipolar. And I'm like, what? And they don't know I'm bipolar usually when they say that, but it's so funny to me.
A place of ignorance. I think like people, they have this misconception that if you have something going on that you are dangerous or violent in some way, which is not the case. My younger sister is bipolar schizophrenic. So I definitely have grown up with almost like trying to be her protector because she is so docile. And then when you hear about her, they're like, oh, and I'm like, you would never even know that, but people make these off the cuff references that are very offensive.
Yes. And I will say part of that is, so our brain creates biases naturally, right? Just whatever information we have, it makes assumptions. That's how it's designed. And that kept us alive for centuries or thousands of years, for millennia. So what happens is when you see something negative, and here I am going to say the media has not done good justice here. And it doesn't bother me the way that media represents different things, because I think, well, Hollywood makes up everything. Absolutely. Like love stories don't actually happen that way. And, the good guy doesn't always win, And so, I know it's suspension of disbelief, but your brain, if you don't actively tell it that, will start to actually believe these things. And so people think that, people with schizophrenia are very dangerous. They think that people with dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder, that they're very dangerous. Mm-hmm. No, not at all. In fact, it tends to be just the opposite, actually. They tend to be very afraid of other things because they don't always know what's going on. And so, you have to give your brain the correct information. So what I tell people is always counteract that with research. If you see a movie or a TV show about a certain diagnosis, take literally 60 seconds of your life, literally 60 seconds, and Google that condition and see what it's actually about, and give your brain that good information. Yeah. What are some other tips you have to counteract that?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I normally do if I see anything that I consider to be negative about dyslexia or anything like that, I normally do go and research. Literally, I will Google the good side of dyslexia or the good side of whatever I'm going through or whatever someone around me is going through so that I can help them. So I think that's a really good thing. And I also, you can't get around having a sense of community. So for us at Refine Labs, now that we have the ERG, it has opened up a whole new world, because this is not something that people would normally talk about at work. I don't think I've ever told anyone at a job that I had dyslexia. I have very great ways of hiding that, like, I need support. So I think being able to even talk about it has opened doors.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to say ERG is Employee Resource Group, for those that don't know. We forget sometimes we're in the HR world and we just know stuff.
Absolutely.
Tara made a good point. Your brain is both amazing and terrible at the same time, and it can create both. So when you've had a diagnosis, and I love that you started by sharing, about a coworker's son's diagnosis. A lot of times, so one of the first things that you're usually going to have to deal with are your own emotions.
Absolutely.
Right. And always take the time to process through that. And it's okay to be upset, scared, angry, that you have to deal with something. It can be tough, and take the time to deal with that. Please see somebody professionally discuss it if if it continues to be a problem. But also know it's not bad news. Very much to your point, Jessica, it's not bad news. A diagnosis is just a way to understand yourself. You've always been this way. This isn't new in most cases. Sometimes neurodiversity can come along as you've progressed, like with TBIs, traumatic brain injury or something like that. But it's just still you, and it doesn't define you. Yeah. It's just a part of you.
It's one of the characteristics, I would say. Absolutely.
Say that one more time.
I would say it's one of many characteristics about, for me, I would say these are not I wouldn't say I'm dyslexic before I would say I'm Black and I'm a female. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like it's just another way to identify.
Yeah, it is. It's like, this is just part of me. It's not a big deal. Like, you don't look at somebody and go, oh, there goes that person with a spleen. Like, nobody says that. This is just part of you, Yeah. And sometimes it's important to identify with that, and sometimes it's not. It just kind of depends on the circumstance. So you'll start to learn to navigate right after you've gotten diagnosed. And the important thing is also everybody else's response. So I want to dive into that a little bit more. I just had, not long ago, a friend of mine post on Facebook that her son was diagnosed with autism. Mm-hmm. Well, if you've ever watched my show or ever seen me speak, you probably know that autism is one of my favorite neurodiversities. It may be my favorite neurodiversity, to the point I am actually partnered with someone who is on the spectrum. So, and my top advisor is is autistic, and so people were on there going, "Oh, you're so brave. Oh, we're sorry. Oh, we're here for you." And I'm like, "What? No,
Mhm.
no, 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 no." And so I got on there and I was like, "Congratulations." I was
Mhm.
like, "Your son is going to be spectacular."
Yeah.
And congratulations isn't necessarily the right response, but I know her and I knew that what she needed to hear was that something was positive
It'll be
and
okay.
that it's a good thing. And
Mhm.
so I kind of was trying to counteract that, but say positive things or ask questions. If you're not sure if this is good news or neutral news or bad news, ask, how do you feel about that?
Mhm.
Tell me about that.
Mhm.
And people think autism, they think Rain Man. And that's
True.
like,
They
again, back
have
to the media.
this, and
That's
there's
not it.
so many things on the spectrum. So absolutely, I think it's the asking questions is one thing, and then you reaching out to this person, whoever that is, and that you know them, you two could have a private conversation, kind of like I did with
Mhm.
this employee. So my biggest thing is when someone comes to me and tells me about something in this manner is to get a sense of community, like talk
Yes.
to someone, whether that's a therapist or a family member, or you can find other people. So that's why it was so important with this employee, is that as soon as he told me, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, oh, that's me, like, let's talk. And I literally said, tell your son he's gonna be awesome. Like, he's gonna like all this great stuff. But I think as a kid, it really wasn't that way. So I will say, when I
No.
not diagnosed as a kid, you want to be like everyone else. So I remember thinking like, well, why can't everybody else look at a sheet of paper and like everything not change? You know what I mean? Why can't the numbers not move around for them? But I actually got diagnosed because my parents would like verbally test me or ask me questions about my homework, and I have it all. And you put a sheet of paper in front of me and it's like, woo, everything.
Yeah. Don't know. Yeah.
I have no clue what it says. Can't do it. And so I would do exams, just verbal exams, and like it would be fine. Like I could ace a test, but if you put a sheet of paper in front of me, I'm done. So this has come up throughout my life. Like as you can see behind me, I have all of my degrees. So like
Mhm.
I went to college, loved it, but there were workarounds, and I have had to do that in jobs too. Like I've had to like get programs to like, okay, if I need to read something, like there's a way for me to do it.
Right.
Again, I will say I hit that at the beginning of my career. When I started in HR, I would never have told anyone because I thought that it would hinder me, and that
Yeah.
wasn't my own, you know, uh, sense of like not accepting myself. So yeah.
Yeah. And you do have to go through that. And I do want to give space to that. Somebody newer to a diagnosis, it's going to be a little rougher, especially the older you are. The
Mhm.
older you are, the newer it feels, the scarier it can be.
Absolutely.
And you, just as people may project onto you about what you can or cannot do,
Project on
you
your.
may project to yourself, first of all, yes. And then also you may project onto other people how they're going to react to you.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so kind of all sides of the equations have to learn to listen. And we have a great question here. It says, any suggestions for helping someone engage in actions to help them better understand what the diagnosis means for them?
Mm.
I'm going to let you start with that one, Jessica.
Yeah, I think that one's really important when I think about like knowing what's true and what's just garbage on Google. So I would be very mindful of what you're reading on Google and making sure that like it's credited information. Um,
Yes.
and then even talking to your doctor. I am infamous for going to the doctor with a whole spreadsheet. Like we're gonna talk, and I don't care if you're busy. Like we're gonna talk through every one of my questions. So even
Yeah.
like making sure that you're talking to your medical provider, and it's not just like, oh, this is what's wrong with you. Here are some pamphlets. Like, no, like have true conversations about what you can do and what resources are available to you.
And also make sure that you're with the right medical professional. And
Yeah.
I want to really highlight that
Mhm.
because there are a lot of doctors out there that if you're not normal, you're less than, you're disabled, I just don't want to deal with you. And in most cases, neurodiversity is not a disability. I want to emphasize that in most cases, it is not a disability. It just means that the person processes differently. So it's very important to have somebody that understands that. Maybe find somebody who specializes in
Exactly.
your condition, in neurodiversity in general. And that's also true for mental health professionals
Mhm.
as well, by the way. Um, that can be a very helpful tool to be very, very careful. And yes, self-advocacy is so important. And I'm the same as you. In fact, I'm so much that way. I use the thing called direct primary care. If it's in your state, I highly recommend that to anybody on this watching this show. It's inexpensive. You always get an hour visit. I can text my doctor and ask her little questions. It's a great network full of specialists too. It's a really wonderful experience. So, find the medical professional that works for you with your diagnosis. And it may or may not be the person who diagnoses you.
Exactly. Yes. Second opinions matter. I would also say that.
Yes.
Like
second opinions matter. Yes. Almost anytime you get a diagnosis, just go ahead and get a second opinion. Just do it. Just do it, because you never know. And they may catch something different, and it may be that the diagnosis is the same, but your treatment needs to be different because of something this other person caught. Therapy, and then start and not only researching the diagnosis in general. And yes, please be very careful. Look for educational, look for Harvard, Cornell, university type stuff. Yeah. Look for government sites can be helpful. And also things like Psychology Today. Those are some really good, really, really good sources. YouTube, be real careful. Be real careful. It can be great. It can be great. Okay, I want to put that out there. It can be if you find the right human to follow. But that can be treacherous waters. But another thing too is to start figuring out the things that you can do to make yourself more comfortable. Yeah. Right. So for instance, for me, one of the things that happen, and a common misconception about bipolar is that we're erratic and we're just all over the place with our moods. Yeah. Not at all. Very long ups, very long downs. That's one of the main characteristics that goes with it. And so I've learned to manage the stages as I climb, as I decline. I use sensory items. So one of the main things you can do with most neurodiversities, it helps to do grounding exercises. So you talked about having anxiety, and there's all different types. So you can have something that's tactile where you touch it and you're very mindful of all of that.
Yeah, I have my rocks in front of me right now.
Yay! See, there you go. All my stuff's behind me, so I can't really reach back there and grab it, but I have a whole plethora of things. Actually, you know what? I will show y'all one of my favorites. It's at my desk back here. This is my bunny. She is very fuzzy, and she has different little textures inside her ear, and I can mess with her body parts. She's not alive, obviously. So I'm not violating a real bunny. But it feels, I can use that to focus on that and kind of reprogram my brain. And so look up grounding exercises, and different ones work for different folks. If you are ADHD, accepting your need for movement is going to be huge.
Yeah. Get things on your desk or around you. It's all helpful. Yeah. I have
my gosh.
But I have stones all over my desk. I'm really into chakras and all that stuff. So I have stones that I can touch and all this stuff. So yeah.
And Tara says we're funny today. I just, what are you going to do? I tell people, you have to just learn to be comfortable with who you are. And this is a big part of, and this is a great time to talk about the idea of being authentically you. So it's a huge thing. Everybody talks about it right now. Yeah. And one of the main things I like to share with people is you don't need to be all of you all the time. Not just for the other people, but for yourself. It could be very overwhelming.
And it can take time. You don't, I want to give, be mindful of when you first get diagnosed, it's okay not to be okay. It is okay to feel whatever you feel, whether that's disappointment or anxious, that is okay. And it normally takes some time. So for me, like I said, I was a child. So it just became morphed into my personality and who I am. But I don't know how that feels when you're diagnosed as an adult. So I want to acknowledge that it is different. So, and it takes time.
Take that time. Okay. Yeah. Take that time. Let it sink in. And then you do need to tell the people around you, the ones that you love, the ones that you're very close with, people that can help you watch for things. For instance, my husband is remarkable with the seizure disorder. He will see things before I feel them. because
Mhm.
I'm so used to it. My body just does, and so he'll see things and he'll go, your face is ticking today, let's be careful. And so then I know, okay, let's take these steps, that kind of thing. Um, he automatically, his behaviors will change whether I'm going up into mania
Mhm.
and in mania. And then once I come down, he just automatically shifts and adjusts.
Yeah.
And he'll ask me sometimes, where I'm at or specifics, but it's important to share that so that you have those people. I've had friends that do I shouldn't say had, like they're in the past. I have friends that do the same. I killed all of
Yeah.
them. That's what happened. No. Dangerous bipolar disorder. I just murdered all of them randomly. No, I have wonderful friends that are all very supportive as well. My sister is so cute. So she went through counseling training, and she is a counselor. She works with kids. She does pet therapy, a therapy with a wag. If you're in Texas and you want to have visits from the all famous Maslow, who's been on the show, and Michaela, you could definitely have that. But she even as a child was so remarkable, would come and just sit with me and hold my hand, didn't, like 2 and 3 years old, didn't even understand, and was just very empathetic. And as she grew, now she'll ask the questions. And one of the main things I learned from her is the importance of reaching and accepting reaches.
Mm.
So when somebody reaches out to you and wants to know or wants to help or wants to tell you something going on with them, it's important to stop and accept that reach.
Yeah.
And even if you're not comfortable answering a certain question, still thank them for that and share something with them to, yes, take the time to acknowledge that they made that reach and thank them for letting them, thank them for wanting to come into your world and to be helpful.
One of the exercises that I do with my sister specifically, but with other family members too, is we have this thing where we'll say, if you knew me, and you fill in the blank. So whatever day it is, you'll say, if you knew me today, you would know I feel sad. Or if you knew me today, you would know I need help. Or it could be anything, but it's just, if you knew me, you would know. And that is a way for us to open up the dialogue on like how somebody might be feeling. So yeah, I think that's
that's wonderful. That's extremely important. So have the dialogues, right?
Yeah.
When there's a diagnosis, especially if it's your child and they can't speak for themselves, I talked about this a little bit on the last show. You need to learn to read their signs.
Yeah.
And how they're communicating to you what they need, because they may not be able to articulate it.
Yeah.
Like you probably couldn't look at your parents and go, the things on the pages are swirling everywhere. I don't understand what's going on.
Look up the pages and be like, I don't like
this. But they figured it out. They took the time to stop and think, okay, well, let's ask her about these things and let's see what's going on. So explore that with your children.
Yeah.
It's really the same thing as an adult. That's the little secret. Like you're so used to being you that it may be hard to explain to someone else. So you have to learn to explain to other people who you are and what's going on. Let's talk about the importance of correcting people when they have the wrong idea.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of people that have told me that they're afraid to do this, but I find it extremely important to do. So do you have an example of when? Yeah. Okay. So tell us your story.
So my example is specific to my sister. So just for context, it's my younger sister. So I've grown up. I think it's funny because I feel like when there's like such a diagnosis in a family, it like morphs the people around you just as much.
It does.
So growing up, my sister was diagnosed bipolar schizophrenic at 13. So at the time I was like 16. And so it kind of shaped the whole family. Like I actually went to college and got a degree in psychology because I wanted to understand her and what she was going through. So it like morphed my life as well. But I have been in many, many, many situations where people are talking in a very negative or condescending tone about people that are bipolar schizophrenic, not knowing that I have a sister that is bipolar schizophrenic. So it's really ironic. And I don't know. I've grown in this area because I used to come from a place of being pissed off when people would respond. I would like push back at them.
Which is that's also very normal. I do want to stop and say that's very normal.
Yeah. So I went through a phase where I was like, oh, you got something to say, so I'm going to tear you down. but that I don't want to be that way anymore. So I have now come from a place of like just telling people, like, if they say something that I would think is offensive, I will say, oh, and by the way, like, my sister is bipolar schizophrenic and she doesn't act that way, or like, because normally it's around violence or these people do this, and it's like, oh, and she is the most terrified person you'll ever meet. She doesn't leave her house. You know what I mean? Like, so like even identifying, and then that opens up a conversation. But that has to come from a place of peace. Okay, I got to be in the right mood for that.
There are still days I may punch you in the face.
Still, depends on the day. I might still clap back, but
you might still have to hear about it for a while, because when I decide to go off, it goes for a minute.
Choose peace.
And thank you, Tara. Yes, we love you too so very much. And by the way, everybody check out Tara Furiani, not the HR lady. If you want an advocate for all humans, that's your lady. So and that's how we met with Tara. So it's one of those things too. So you have to learn how to address, especially in a employment situation, right? You have to learn to address it directly and to help educate them. So one of the things I like to encourage people to do is, as they're going into employment, and I would prefer to do this unless you've needed accommodations during the interview process, then that's different. After the signed offer letter is on the table. And then you sit down with them before you start and talk to them about the accommodations that you need. You kind of educate them, say, hey, this is what I have going on and this is what it's like for me. Because let me tell you, if you know one person with the condition, you know one person with the condition. It's different for everybody. And it's good to ask people about their experiences because it can help you learn, but their experience isn't going to be your experience.
Absolutely.
Not going to be the same thing. For instance, even just with some physical conditions, I have a very weird condition called mast cell activation syndrome. Basically, my body just randomly decides it's allergic to things and just has a major reaction. I just met somebody else with that same condition. And I mean, it can be like, you can brush up against grass and it'll feel like knives or something like that. It's the weirdest thing. She has more the anaphylaxis and the breathing issues. I have more the skin issues. And so we just kind of sat there and talked. So same diagnosis, wildly different. And it's the same thing for mental health and neurodiversity. So educate people about you. And I want to say, so we've kind of covered a lot. I kind of feel like this episode could have gone on for another hour easily. But so we've talked about the importance of giving yourself grace, right? And letting yourself get used to a diagnosis. Do good research from reputable sources. If you'd like some sources, if you have questions about where to find information on a particular diagnosis, I have a list. Please reach out to me. I will send it to you. So we've talked about talking to other people, accepting reaches from people, the importance of finding your community. Find other people that have your diagnosis. Talk to them. Share stories, laugh about it. Like I did this totally.
And there are tons of group. Like I would say, I'm not a big fan of Facebook and Twitter and all of that, but this is where it actually comes in handy, is when you can find other people that you can have a sense of community with. So it could be used for good. Groups.
Find groups. Or pages that particularly speak to you, that are run by somebody with your diagnosis. And just neurodiverse people in general, we've kind of all formed a little community. Like it's kind of like with physical disability, it's all kind of the same thing. So the last thing I want to touch on that I get asked about quite a lot is, if I'm not disabled, then why am I treated like I'm disabled, even in a job application? It'll specifically say, if you have this, then you must be disabled. So here, check this little box to check that you're disabled. What are your takes on that?
So I can personally say I've never checked that box. And that has just been like, I don't identify that way. So I have just chosen not to do that. However, I will say from an HR standpoint, I have a bone to pick here because I feel like a lot of companies collect this data and they don't do anything with it. It just sits there, and then it makes the person uncomfortable that someone on the recruitment team has seen it when they actually haven't. So I think there's a bone to pick there, but I personally have not ever checked the box, and that's just a personal preference.
And that's exactly where I was going to go with this. Is it's personal preference. Do you identify as disabled? Do you feel like you're disabled? Okay, then check it. If not, then don't. It's not your medical diagnoses are not their business at all. And I'm going to do some more episodes about things to come after diagnoses. We're going to have one about tips and tricks and tools and toys and all of that kind of fun stuff. And we're going to be talking even more about other professional things. We're going to be speaking with Kat Alexander about the journey of, kind of handling the diagnosis and the emotions and after that. So come back for other episodes. There's so much more to unpack here. But thank you so much for joining me today, Jessica. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, I definitely love LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn. I always have a lot to say. Some things you might not like. I don't care. But no, definitely follow me on LinkedIn. She's
wonderful. I highly recommend following her. So definitely connect to both of us on LinkedIn. If you have questions about anything that we said here today, if you want to reach out, if you want help finding your community, we would both be very happy to help you. So please connect to us and have a wonderful day. See you next week, everybody. Same time.